Everyone thought she was just another ordinary girl trapped in poverty, but her secret was darker than anyone dared to imagine. In the shadows of her desperate life, she sold her innocence, not to a stranger, not for fleeting survival, but to the most dangerous enemy her family had ever known. The deal was not wrapped in roses or whispered promises of love. It was forged in cold ink and harsher truths, a contract bound by desperation and power. Why would a billionaire, ruthless and feared in every boardroom he stepped into, pay for her surrender? Why did his piercing blue eyes lock onto her like prey when he could have any woman in the world? This was not desire. This was not chance. This was something far more sinister. A deal struck in silence, an agreement that promised survival but demanded everything. What happens when a cold billionaire buys a girl's life for a year, promising no love, no emotions, only control? Could a heart endure such a bargain, or would it shatter under the weight of secrets too heavy to carry? And when the truth finally rose from the ashes, when every lie was stripped bare, who would be destroyed first? The girl who sold her freedom, or the man who chained her to his war? The questions burned like fire in the night. Could a love story be born from a cage, from manipulation, from betrayal? Was this the path to salvation, or the straight road into ruin? She believed she was saving her family. He knew he was avenging his past. Neither realized they were walking into the same storm, one that would tear down their walls and leave them standing on the edge of destruction. The world saw him as a king. The city whispered his name in fear and fascination. Damien Wolf. The man who never lost a deal, never showed weakness, never allowed anyone close enough to see the scars that carved his heart. To the public, he was untouchable. But to her, he was the cage and the key, the destroyer and the savior, the man who could ruin her and rescue her in the same breath. The night she signed the contract, she thought she was saving her mother. In truth, she was stepping into a labyrinth built on lies, betrayal, and revenge. But the truth behind that bargain was much darker than she could ever imagine. She was Lena Carter, a young woman who had never known the comfort of safety or the luxury of dreams. Born into hardship, her childhood was a battlefield marked by scarcity and sacrifice. Her father had abandoned the family early, leaving her mother to shoulder the crushing weight of survival. Every coin mattered, every meal was rationed, every bill was a looming shadow on the wall. And as her mother's health declined, the fragile balance of their lives collapsed further into despair. By day, Lena was a paralegal student, clinging to law school as though the letters of the law could one day free her from poverty. By night, she worked endless shifts in dim offices, her hands blistered, her eyes swollen from exhaustion, her body trembling under the pressure of holding a life together with threads too thin to last. Love, romance, fairy tales, these belonged to other girls, in other stories. For Lena, there was only survival. Every smile she forced was a mask, every step forward a silent cry for help. The world never saw her struggle. The world never cared. And yet, destiny carried her into the path of the man least likely to offer salvation. Damien Wolf, a billionaire not just known for his wealth, but for his legend. A man who ruled empires of finance, technology, and real estate with a hand as steady as ice. His name alone could silence a room. His gaze could unnerve seasoned politicians, and his power stretched like an iron web across the city. He was not just feared, he was mythic, a figure both admired and despised. But behind that empire lay scars invisible to the naked eye. Damien had been betrayed, humiliated in the cruelest way possible, abandoned at the altar by the woman he thought he would marry. His fiancée, Celeste Vaughan, had not merely left him. She had conspired with his greatest rival, Victor Langston, destroying his heart and staining his pride. From that day forward, Damien built walls of steel around his soul. No emotions, no attachments, no weakness. He was not a man anymore. He was an empire wrapped in human form. The city only knew the cold exterior. They saw the sharp suits, the black cars, the penthouse high above the skyline. They did not see the loneliness that bled into his nights, the haunted look that sometimes flickered in his eyes before vanishing like a ghost. He had vowed never to love again, never to let anyone close enough to destroy him. And for years he succeeded. Until Lena walked into his office. She was supposed to be invisible, just a paralegal, just a girl delivering a contract. But when her trembling hands laid the papers on his desk and her steady eyes met his, something shifted. She did not fawn over him. She did not bow to his power. She spoke with honesty, with defiance, with the spark of a woman too stubborn to break. And for Damien, that was irresistible. She was not like the others who begged for his attention. She was different. She was dangerous. In that moment, he decided he wanted her. Not for love, not for romance, but for something darker. He offered her a deal. 1 year, 1 contract, no emotions, no questions. She would be his companion, his shield in public, his presence in private. In return, he would erase her debts, cover her mother's medical bills, and place her in a world of luxury she had never dreamed of. Lena knew it was madness, knew it was a devil's bargain, but as her mother's health spiraled and her bills grew heavier, she saw no other way. And so, with a trembling hand and a breaking heart, she signed. That night, her world shifted forever. She stepped from poverty into a penthouse of glass and marble, from anonymity into the blinding lights of the elite. Cameras flashed, whispers followed her, judgment fell upon her shoulders like chains. To them she was a gold digger, a pawn in Damien's endless games. To him she was a contract, a possession. But beneath the glittering surface of their arrangement lay something neither of them could deny, a spark too dangerous to ignore. Damien had chosen her for reasons Lena could not understand. But hidden in his gaze, in the weight of his silence, was a secret. He did not choose her by chance. He chose her because her past, her family, her very blood was tied to the wound that had broken him. She was not just a companion. She was the key to his revenge. The story of Lena Carter and Damien Wolfe was not one of innocence and love at first sight. It was a war disguised as a romance, a battlefield carved into the heart of a contract. And as Lena stepped deeper into his world, she would discover that every smile carried a lie, every gesture carried a price, and every moment with him dragged her closer to a truth she was never meant to see, because Damien Wolfe did not buy her for love. He bought her for vengeance, and the secret behind his choice was a ghost from his past that could destroy them both. The night had draped Manhattan in a blanket of glass and fire when Lena Carter found herself standing before the double doors of Wolfe Enterprises. Her palms were slick against the leather folder she clutched to her chest, the weight of it pressing like a heartbeat. This was supposed to be simple. Walk in, deliver the contract, leave unnoticed. Just another errand for a paralegal desperate to keep her job. But nothing about Damien Wolfe was ever simple. Inside his office, the air shifted. The walls stretched into glass towers overlooking the glittering city, but the room's grandeur was eclipsed by the man seated behind the desk, Damien Wolfe. His presence devoured the silence. Blue eyes sharp as blades, dark hair tousled as though perfection was his natural state, and a stillness that radiated both power and danger. Lena's breath caught as his gaze sliced into her. For a heartbeat, the city disappeared, leaving only the predator and the girl who had stumbled into his cage. "You're not Sinclair," he said, voice smooth yet edged with steel. Lena forced her chin higher. "Mr. Sinclair had an emergency. He sent me instead." He studied her, as though peeling away layers she didn't know she had. Then, slowly, a curve touched his lips. Not a smile, but a verdict. Interesting. What began as an errand twisted into something else entirely. Damien closed the contract folder without signing and leaned forward, his words a blade wrapped in silk. "I have a proposal for you, Miss Carter. 1 year, exclusive. No questions, no feelings. A contract between you and me." Lena's stomach dropped. Surely she had misheard. "You're talking about—" "A mutually beneficial arrangement," he interrupted, gaze never wavering. "You need money. I need someone at my side. 1 year. Nothing more." The silence thundered. She thought of her mother, frail and fading under hospital lights, of bills stacked higher than her courage. Every part of her screamed to run. But desperation is the strongest chain. Against her will, she whispered, "I'll think about it." His eyes darkened with triumph. "You have 24 hours." And in that instant, the contract meant to bind her fate was no longer a document. It was a crossroads. She could walk away, preserve the scraps of freedom she had left. Or she could sign her soul away to a man who seemed more like the devil himself. When she returned the next day, her hand trembled as she held the pen. Her voice was steady, but her heart was breaking. "I agree." And as the ink dried, Damien's world consumed hers. Mini-hook. But when their eyes locked, his cold, hers defiant, something neither of them expected had already begun. For weeks, Lena played the part. She stood beside Damien at galas, dripping with chandeliers and whispers, her smile fixed while cameras flashed. She endured the cutting remarks of women like Charlotte Sinclair, who looked at her as though she were nothing more than a stray plucked from the street. Each night she returned to his penthouse, where silence filled the rooms and rules dictated her life. She told herself it was just business. She told herself she was strong enough not to feel. But the truth was far more dangerous. Because beneath Damien's ice, something flickered. He defended her once, publicly, ruthlessly, shutting down a rival with words sharp enough to bleed. And for the first time, Lena saw a crack in his armor. That night, when he told her, "You're mine," his voice was not just possession, it was confession. Yet even as the walls crumbled, secrets festered in the shadows. Lena stumbled upon files in his study, documents that revealed her life had been mapped long before their meeting. Names, connections, truths she was never meant to see. Damien hadn't chosen her by accident. He had chosen her because of Victor Langston, the man her mother had once warned her never to trust, the rival who had stolen Damien's fiancée and destroyed his heart. Lena was not his salvation. She was his weapon. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. "You used me," she whispered, her voice breaking. Damien's jaw tightened. "You signed the contract." But contracts could not bind a heart, and hers was already tangled in his. As if fate itself conspired against them, Celeste returned. Draped in red, smiling like sin, she appeared at Damien's door, her presence slicing through Lena like fire. "I made a mistake," Celeste murmured, her eyes never leaving his. "I shouldn't have left you." The ground trembled beneath Lena. Was she only a placeholder for the woman who had destroyed him? And then the world found out. The contract, every sordid detail, splashed across headlines, dissected in tabloids, smeared across screens. Lena was branded a gold digger, Damien a manipulator. Paparazzi swarmed. Friends turned away. Her mother's texts cut like knives. "Is it true? Did you sell yourself?" Lena's world crumbled. She confronted Damien, her eyes blazing with pain. "You told me no one would ever know. You promised." "I didn't leak it," he said, voice low, dangerous. "Then who?" she demanded. The answer struck like lightning. Not Celeste, not Victor, but her own sister, Angela, who had sold the story for money. The betrayal shattered her. Her life was ashes, her trust obliterated, her heart torn between rage and love. She tried to leave, to escape the labyrinth of lies, but Damien stopped her, his voice raw with something he had never admitted. "You're not just part of my revenge, Lena. You're the only thing that matters." And now, as the past crashed into the present, one question remained. Would they destroy each other, or save each other? The night was colder than any Lena had ever known, not because of the air outside, but because of the silence in the warehouse where she was chained. Her wrists burned against the rope, her body trembling not from weakness, but from fury. She had walked into Damien Wolf's world willingly, signing her name on paper that was supposed to protect her family, but now she was nothing more than a pawn in Victor Langston's game of revenge. Victor circled her like a predator, his grin sharpened by cruelty. "It's almost poetic," he said, his voice a low hiss. "Damien built an empire on control, yet the one thing he actually cares about is you. That makes you the perfect weapon." Lena's throat tightened, but she forced her voice steady. "You'll never win. He'll come for me." Victor's laugh was soft and venomous. "Oh, he'll come. And when he does, he'll have to choose his empire or you. Either way, he loses." Hours passed like centuries until the sound came. Boots on concrete, the crack of doors torn open, a storm flooding the darkness. Damien Wolf had arrived, flanked by his men, his eyes burning with a fire Lena had never seen before. He wasn't dressed in the tailored perfection of a billionaire. He was fury incarnate, stripped to raw determination. "Let her go!" Damien's voice boomed, lethal calm wrapping around every word. Victor pressed a blade against Lena's throat, his smirk daring. "One wrong move, and she bleeds." Time fractured. Damien's world narrowed to a single point, her eyes, wide with fear yet defiant, locked onto his. In that gaze he saw everything, her strength, her pain, her love. For years he had believed emotions were weakness, but in this moment he realized the truth. The only weakness was losing her. "Take me," Damien said, his voice steady. "Let her go, and you can have me." Victor hesitated, shocked by the surrender of a man who never yielded. And in that pause, Damien struck. A single gunshot echoed, the blade clattered to the floor, and Victor crumpled, screaming in pain. In a blur, Damien was at Lena's side, cutting her free, pulling her into his arms with a grip so fierce it felt like he was holding on to life itself. "I've got you," he whispered, voice raw against her hair. "I'll never let you go again." Tears burned Lena's eyes as she collapsed into him, her body trembling with relief. For the first time, he wasn't the billionaire, the predator, the untouchable empire. He was just a man who had finally chosen love over everything else. Hours later, back in the penthouse, silence wrapped around them, but it was no longer cold. Damien stood with the contract in his hands, the very paper that had bound them, defined them, imprisoned them. His fingers trembled as he looked at her, then at the words that had once been his shield. "This ruined everything," he said, voice thick with regret. "I thought this contract would protect me, would keep control in my hands. But all it did was destroy us." Lena's eyes shimmered with pain. "Then why keep it?" He met her gaze, and for the first time no mask remained, just a man stripped bare, standing on the edge of vulnerability. "I won't." And with a sharp, deliberate motion, he tore the contract in half. The paper ripped like thunder, fluttering to the floor in pieces, symbols of every chain, every rule, every wall he had built around his heart. "This was never about power," Damien said, stepping toward her, his voice breaking. "Not anymore. It's about you. You are not a contract. You are not a pawn. You are the only choice I'll ever make." Lena's breath hitched, her hands trembling as she reached for him. "And if love is another prison?" she whispered. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears, his gaze fierce and unyielding. "Then it's the only prison I'll gladly spend my life in. Because with you, love isn't a cage, it's freedom." Her heart shattered and healed all at once. And when his lips finally met hers, it wasn't power or possession. It was surrender. It was truth. It was love. As dawn painted the skyline in gold, Lena stood beside Damien, no longer a girl bound by desperation, but a woman who had fought through shadows to find light. He had chosen her over empire, over vengeance, over control. And she had chosen him, not as a savior or a devil, but as the man who had finally learned how to love. The world would always whisper, always judge, always speculate. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Because love had rewritten the story, and the only question that remained lingered softly in the air. Was this love a prison, or the ultimate release? If you've been drawn into their journey, if you've felt the fire, the pain, and the fragile hope that even in the darkest of places love can be found, then stay with us. Like, share, and subscribe, so you never miss the stories that remind us what it means to fight, to fall, and to rise again. because their battle isn't just fiction. It's the echo of every heart that has ever dared to love against all odds.